Beasts with Benefits by Michael Nguanti. Part 1. Friday, June 13th. Chapter 1. Tried and True. Stephen walked into the hideously fluorescent light of the pet store when an acne-ridden kid about 17 said, in a voice equal parts anemic and apathetic, "Hello, may I help you find something today?" He had orange hair, glasses, and an overbite. He also wore a name tag that said, "Hello, my name is Eugene." "Hi, Eugene. Yeah, actually, I'm looking for a—"
"Gene,"
interrupted the clerk. "Beg your pardon?"
"It's Gene. People call me Gene."
"Oh, sorry, it's just your name tag."
"My name tag says Eugene, yes, I'm aware, but everyone calls me Gene."
"Oh, okay, well,
And I don't even really like the name Gene, but it's what everyone calls me, so I'm pretty much stuck with it at this point."
That's cool. So,
My mom called me Gene, and my dad called me Gene, and my Nana called me, well, she actually called me Walnut, and that's a very long story.
Please, Gene, or Eugene, can we...
Okay, I'll tell you. I want to say I was 4 or 5 when...
"Gene, you're talking this poor man's ear off." They were interrupted by a man wearing a gray pinstripe suit. His skin was bright orange, and he wore a licorice black hairpiece. "Howdy, bucko. Name's Todd Dawson. Welcome to my store." He stretched out a jaundice-colored hand and flashed a toothy smile that looked like 2 rows of chiclets. "Hi, I'm Stephen." "Stephen, how can I help you today?" "I'm here to buy a dog." "Well then, you've come to the right man. I'm actually a dog doctor. A dogter, some might say." "Awesome," said Stephen. "So you're a vet?" Todd let out a boisterous laugh. No. Vets go through a 4-year program to learn animal medicine. Me, I went through an 8-year program, and now I'm not allowed within 100 yards of a school." "Oh. Wait, what?" "Stephen, as a PhD of dog-human psychology, it is my mission to help you find the perfect puppy playmate. How does that sound?" "That sounds great." "Sure it does. Now, why don't we step into my office and we'll get started on the paperwork." "Paperwork?" "Well, of course. It's your first time getting a dog, huh?" Yes," admitted Stephen. "Well, you've got a lot to learn, bucko. Thankfully, I've developed a foolproof psychological examination that will pair you with your ideal canine counterpart." Next to a wall of aquariums, Todd opened a door into a tiny office. Stephen stepped inside, bumping the door into a tremendous mahogany desk covered with paper. On one side of the desk, an old computer sat. On the other side, a tray of dog biscuits, one half-eaten, and a cold cup of coffee. Todd sat in an ugly green leather chair. Behind him were rows of bookshelves, and Stephen could make out a few of their titles. Dog Dogma for Dog Moms, The Problem with Licking, A Puppy Pathology, and 250 Years of the Poodle. Also, every inch of the wall was adorned with picture frames of Todd giving the same toothy grin as before, alongside what Stephen presumed were customers and their new dogs. Stephen's senses felt overwhelmed, and he sat down in the only other chair across from Todd. He then realized the legs of his chair had been shortened, so he sat at least 8 inches below Todd's eye level. "Stephen, how old are you?" asked Todd. "I'm 27, sir." "And what do you do for a living?" "I work in a call center." "Call center? Well, that's honest work, I suppose. How do you like it?" "It's all right, I guess. I really want to make—" "That's good," Todd interrupted. "Stephen, what I'd like to do is ask a few questions that will help me narrow down your options. Narrow down or we put 'em down, as we like to say." "That's a little morbid," said Stephen. "And that," Todd said with a click of his pen, "is a very good segue to my first question. Stephen, does depression or suicide run in your family?" No, not really." Todd made several check marks on his paper. How about any non-prescriptions? Tell me, Steve, do you do drugs? What? No, of course not. Todd looked at Stephen skeptically. Come on, Stephen. Look, Todd Dawson might be a lot of things, but he ain't no narc. You picking up what I'm putting down? Are you smelling what I'm stepping in, Steve-O? Stephen sat there, befuddled. Todd continued. So what is it, baby? X, speed, toot, crack, smack, weed, a little bit of Special K, maybe a little snap, crackle, pop to get you going in the morning? Maybe some golden grams? Mr. Dawson, I'm really confused. Also, I think those last few were just breakfast cereals. Todd frowned and made several more checks on his clipboard. Okay, funny guy, Mr. I Love Cereal. Tell me, do you hate America? That's ridiculous. Finds American values to be, quote, ridiculous. Interesting, Todd said while writing. Jesus, cried Stephen. Bringing old JC into this, are we? Tell me, Stephen, what are your religious views exactly? What? The whole God thing? I don't know. I guess he might exist. Or he might not. But I kind of hope there's a heaven or someplace we go when we die. Hey, is all this really necessary? I don't know, Todd said in a mocking tone. Let me ask you, Stephen, when you're at the call center, am I there telling you how to do the girl voice when you're giving phone sex to the Johns? What? Stephen, I have been doing this a long time, a very long time. Look around you. Did you know that of all the folks I've sold a pup, not one person has ever complained or brought their dog back? Stephen blinked. You can bring the dog back? Well, of course you sure as shit can. It's not like adopting a kid, Stephen. Oh, no, I guess I didn't know, said Stephen, embarrassed. Spotless record, tried and true. So how about showing an ounce of appreciation for the work I'm putting in? How about, Steve? Meet me halfway, babe. All right. I apologize. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for saying that. Now, where were we? Todd looked down at his clipboard. Here we go. What is your sexual orientation? Stephen threw up his hands. Stephen, come on. It's a very simple question. Are you gay, queer, questioning, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, intersex, demisexual, or graysexual? I don't even know what half of those are. Todd looked at Stephen. Now he was the one who was confused. I think I'll just put down unsure, said Todd. No, I'm straight. I had a girlfriend. Oh, baby, Todd's eyes widened. Now we're getting somewhere. No, we're not, said Stephen. I really don't want to talk about it. Stephen, as your canine advisor, it is of the utmost importance that you tell me every little detail of your previous relationship. There was a long pause. Stephen knew the man sitting across from him was strange, and probably not quite right upstairs, but he seemed so genuinely interested and equally determined to sit and listen to the shitstorm Stephen had gone through in the previous slimy and tear-soaked 2 years of his life. No one had offered him the same kindness. Stephen took a breath, and suddenly all of it came spilling out of him. He grabbed the handkerchief out of his pocket 3 times to dab the wet spots forming under his eyes as he cataloged the good, the bad, and the goo-filled. They sat there for 10 minutes, and Todd didn't say a word. He barely moved a muscle. When Stephen finished, they both just sat, and a thick silence blanketed the room. Wow, Todd said after a while. Stephen, I gotta tell you. For a second, Stephen thought he was about to get some cliché piece of advice that he had probably heard 100 times before. Stephen, I have to say you really know how to chew a guy's ear off. Sheesh, chatty Cathy over here. Am I right or am I right? Todd laughed while Stephen looked down at his shoes. Well, said Todd, I think I've heard about all I need to hear, or want to hear for that matter. He walked over to the wall and opened a door completely missed by Stephen, as it was covered in picture frames. On the other side of the door was a long white hallway full of cages and a tumult of barking. "Are you ready to meet your new dog?" asked Todd. Stephen looked up hopefully and followed him through the door. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Man's Best Friend. The hallway was about 10 feet wide and long enough for 40 cages on either side. Each cage housed a dog clamoring for attention. The din of the whelping cocker spaniels and miniature dachshunds made Stephen want to stuff cotton in his ears. "Stephen, the connection between a man and his dog dates back thousands of years," said Todd, lifting his voice over the barking. "Some of the earliest cave paintings depict tribes of hunter-gatherers with dogs scattered among them. They survived together. While it comes as no surprise that man has continued to own and care for his furry companion, it might shock our ancestors to see how the role of dog has transformed from hunter and protector to emotional support animal, a cute plaything." Stephen mused on this point as Todd continued. "That being said, all of us are trying to fill that big hole deep inside ourselves. And your hole, Stephen, is so big. I mean, so big," emphasized Todd. "Well, at first I wasn't sure we had a dog up to the task of filling that hole, day after day, night after night. But finally, after I sat through your long drawn-out story and you were just sitting there, all miserable in your little chair, that's when I thought to myself—" Todd stopped in front of one of the cages and gazed inside. "I've seen that look before." Stephen looked into the cage and nearly fell over. Inside was a small chihuahua, with its right eye almost twice the size of its left, a pronounced underbite, and wiry gray hair only covering half of its body. Its skin was a ghostly gray color, and its tongue limply hung out the corner of its mouth. The poor dog was also visibly shaking from the kennel's cacophony. On the front of the cage was a sign that read, "I'm so popular. My name is Beatrice." "Yep, Beatrice right here is the dog you're after, bucko. Timid, helpless, and giving off that vibe that says unlovable in too many ways to count. Plus, she yaps even more than you do. Yes, the two of you are practically made for each other. What do you think, Stephen? Stevie baby?" Stephen had stopped listening and was standing in front of a kennel a few paces down the hall, utterly mesmerized. "Oh, that's Luna," said Todd brusquely. "She's a handful. Trust me on that. I wouldn't concern yourself with—" "She's beautiful," said Stephen. Her eyes were icy blue, and her coat was a kaleidoscopic blend of white and black. She sat up, docile and attentive, pressing a dark, wet nose against the wire door. Stephen reached out his hand. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," said Todd. "Last person to pet old Luna here lost 3 fingers. Now he plays banjo with his feet." Stephen looked at Todd incredulously. The orange man burst into laughter. "I'm only kidding," Todd said, wiping away a tear. "He's dead now." Stephen looked at him, unamused. Is that why her kennel is bigger than all the rest? This was true. Stephen estimated Luna's cage to be approximately twice the height and width of a regular cage. "Sure, let's go with that," replied Todd. A puzzled look crept across Stephen's face. Luna didn't look vicious at all. In fact, she seemed the best behaved of all the dogs. He stretched out his hand and hung 2 fingers loosely in front of Luna's face. Stephen expected a few investigative sniffs, but instead Luna took a long breath, letting it out slowly through her nose. The air felt warm on Stephen's hand, like ocean spray. Can you let her out, please? Asked Stephen. Hold your horses there, Harry Potter. This isn't Ollivander's dog shop. No, sir. I went to 8 years of school to get my degree in dog-human psychology, and if that doesn't make me an expert, then what was I even doing there in the first place? Stephen waved over Jean, who slowly walked down the hall with a big bag of food under each arm.
How can I help you?
Eugene wheezed. Would you kindly open Luna's kennel? She's coming home with me, Stephen said with a sudden burst of confidence. Stephen, Todd started, you are dangerously close to spoiling my spotless record. Stephen ignored him. Eugene unlocked the kennel, and Luna nearly leapt into Stephen's arms, affectionately kissing him with laps of her long pink tongue. Stephen laughed. Stephen, much like members of the opposite sex, started Todd, dogs may seem interested in order to free themselves from the fiendish hellscape of the kennel, only so they can revert to their bestial roots after their first sniff in your living room. I think I'll take my chances, Stephen said in between showers of wet kisses. But Beatrice, said Todd.
Oh, about that, boss,
interjected Eugene.
I've been meaning to tell you Beatrice has problems with her blood work. She's scheduled to be put down tomorrow, along with Luna here.
Luna seemed to understand what this meant, visibly recoiling at his words. Stephen put a hand on her collar. Does Luna have health problems?
No, she's just kind of a handful.
So I've heard, said Stephen. He looked at Luna. She looked back softly. Stephen felt something in his chest expand. That won't be necessary, interrupted Stephen. I'll be taking Luna off your hands.
Oh, well, I guess that works too,
said Eugene. No, said Todd. It would not. Todd got so close that he was practically touching noses with Stephen. Taking Luna from this place will bring great suffering to you and all those you encounter. Stephen, admittedly creeped out, swore he saw a spider crawl across Todd's forehead. A great darkness lives within her, said Todd, gazing down at Luna, his voice nearly a whisper. Yes, within her eyes, I see a fire unmatched by the greatest conflagration, burning the hearts of men. In ash and blood she writhes, laughing at us and our foolishness, for thinking we could tame the hound that hell itself rejected. Stephen looked down at Luna. She yawned and licked her nose. Stephen smiled. Got it. I'll take one hellhound, please. There was a low rumble in Todd's throat, and he spun on his heels, muttering under his breath as he tore down the hall. Chapter 3. A Friendly Face. Stephen shopped for puppy supplies, while Eugene helped him finish the remaining paperwork. Not before long, Stephen was leaving the store with his new companion, leashed up and happily hopping in circles around him. Stephen couldn't guess how long Luna had been cooped up in the horrific kennel, and so he brought her straight to the park. There they played for hours, running through puffballs and chasing birds as their shadows stretched long across the summer grass. Luna was inexhaustible, and because it was late in the afternoon, with the park close to empty, Stephen casually ignored the sign saying, "All dogs must be kept on leash," so he and Luna could have their first game of fetch. Stephen threw the ball, and Luna retrieved it fast. He threw it again, and she returned it faster, as if besting her previous time. Stephen wondered how far he could throw it before she came back unsuccessful. He cocked his arm as far back as he could and gave it all the power he could summon, sending the ball high into the air. Luna took off like a bullet, and Stephen squinted into the distance as he saw her veer off course. Stephen scanned the horizon, trying to find what had grabbed Luna's attention. and saw a young woman with blonde hair in a green two-piece swimsuit soaking up the last rays of sunshine. Stephen raced after her, shouting, "Luna, stop! Heel girl, stop! Luna! Hey, watch out!" The sunbather, upon hearing the commotion, removed an earbud and looked up in the direction of Luna running toward her. Unperturbed, she casually propped herself up on a forearm, smiling warmly at Luna, who was fast approaching. A million thoughts raced through Stephen's head, but most vividly was Todd Dawson's warning about fire and hounds from hell and playing the banjo with one's feet. He should have listened. He should have just taken Todd's suggestion and picked Beatrice as his new pet and cried himself to sleep after masturbating for the third night in a row. Stephen breathed a sigh of relief as Luna licked the face and sunglasses of the attractive young woman instead of attacking her. Stephen, sweating and out of breath, made up the distance between them. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how she got off her leash," he lied. "Oh, it's quite all right," replied the girl, and Stephen detected the hint of an Australian accent. "You are so adorable. What's her name?" "This is Luna," Stephen replied. "Hey, Luna," she said in a high-pitched voice. "How old is she?" "Oh, I just got her. I'm really not sure, but she looks young," Stephen said. "Well, it's nice to meet a friendly face. I just moved here." "It's nice to meet you. My name's Stephen." "Sylvia." They shook hands cordially. "Sylvia, where are you from?" asked Stephen. Sylvia laughed. "The South," she said with a coy smile. Stephen chuckled. "Way south." "Exactly right." "Oh, you're the first person to get that." Sylvia tucked a loose strand of blonde hair and removed her glasses, revealing 2 twinkling sapphires. "America, I love you. But literally everyone here has the worldview of Carrot," joked Sylvia. "How do you like it so far?" asked Stephen. "Love it. But there's just one thing. Do you know a good spot for sushi?" Stephen blinked, and inside the stuffy post office symbolizing his memory, a pudgy mail carrier overturned trash cans and vending machines as he tore down the hall into a room with a sign over the door that read, "Department of Things That Don't Suck." He went into a filing cabinet labeled Food and opened it with a vicious yank. The accordion of folders all read the same thing, Chick-fil-A. However, stuck between files for grilled nuggets and vanilla shake was a napkin with the nearly illegible handwriting of one of Stephen's co-workers, Sudeep, an accountant who earned way more money than Stephen and ate at much fancier restaurants. "There's a spot on 5th called Sakai. Really good," Stephen said, pretending he had eaten there before. "Perfect. Thank you so much. I've been desperate for a place to take my boyfriend for his birthday tomorrow." Stephen's heart sank a little bit, though he successfully hid his disappointment. Luna interrupted them, sticking her wet nose against the back of Sylvia's bikini bottom. The Australian let out a yelp, followed by an adorable giggle as she arched her back and covered her backside with her palms. "Stop that, Luna!" scolded Stephen as he pulled her back by the collar. "I think your dog likes my ass," remarked Sylvia. "Well, what's not to like?" Stephen said with another surge of confidence. He expected a slap. Instead, Sylvia raised her eyebrows and, still smiling, said, "I got the swimsuit today. Tell me what you think." And she pirouetted, showing off her hourglass figure and sun-kissed skin. Luna leapt forward, held tightly by Stephen, who laughed, saying, "Luna definitely likes it, and I'm not one to disagree with good taste." Sylvia curtsied playfully as a breeze rolled by, chilling them both. It got cold rather quickly. I should be heading back," said Sylvia, pulling a shawl over her shoulders and sliding her toes into a pair of tan leather sandals. "Can I walk you to your car?" asked Stephen. Sylvia smiled. "You think I need protection?" "Sure, but it won't be me protecting you. That's why I keep her around," Stephen said, lifting the leash. Sylvia laughed, gathering her things in a large beach towel and stowing it under her arm. "I don't see why not. I'm up this way," she said, leading them toward the entrance of the park. "Have you ever been to Australia?" she asked. "I haven't. Is it nice there?" "It's beautiful. So beautiful." "Do you miss it?" Sylvia nodded, and they walked quietly for a few moments. "Do you mind me asking where you live?" asked Stephen, as much out of curiosity as to break the deafening quiet. "Not at all. I'm on the 3rd floor of the Biltmore." "You're kidding. I'm on the 4th floor. 406. "I'm 306. So you're to blame for all the reckless sex noise," Sylvia said with a wink. Stephen grinned. "That sounds more like my roommate and his girlfriend." "Does she live with you too?" "Technically she lives with her parents, but more often she stays with us." "Ugh, my parents would throw a fit if they thought I was shacking up." "Are they old-fashioned?" asked Stephen. Sylvia pondered this for a moment. "I guess you could say that, but to be honest, I really don't know when it went out of fashion, so it's hard to say." She continued, "Personally, I'm a bit fond of my space to have someone constantly there. I'd feel like I couldn't relax properly. Do you know what I mean?" Stephen nodded, though truthfully he cried a pool of tears into the girl-sized crater where his ex-lover used to sleep. "Well, this is me," said Sylvia. Stephen's eyes grew wide as Sylvia leaned her back against a gray Honda Civic covered in Second Amendment stickers. "So, you like guns?" Sylvia chuckled. "Well, I wouldn't be a very good assassin if I didn't, now would I?" Stephen gaped. "I'm only joking," said Sylvia. "My dad's a manufacturer. I just sell them." "Wow, I never would have guessed. So are you carrying?" "Sure am," she said, brandishing a silver 9mm handgun. Stephen's eyes looked like two saucers. "How did I not see that before?" Sylvia, clearly amused by his reaction, asked, "Do you want to hold it?" Without saying a word, Stephen grabbed it by the handle. It was heavier than he expected. The grip was smooth. He looked down the sight, pointing it to the ground, though he didn't dare put his finger over the trigger. "Have you ever shot before?" asked Sylvia. Stephen couldn't even pretend this time. "Never," he muttered. "I'll have to take you with me then. There's literally nothing more thrilling." Stephen looked at her, smirking and with one eyebrow raised. "Nothing?" Sylvia smiled. Rolling her eyes, she took back the pistol. "Nothing." Sylvia opened the door to the back seat of her car, unclasping a case to stow her weapon safely. She closed the door, looking back at Stephen. "It was so nice to meet a friendly face. 2 of them, for that matter." Stephen smiled broadly. "And with dimples!" Sylvia exclaimed. "Very cute." Stephen's cheeks went chartreuse as he looked away from the stunning Aussie. "Don't be embarrassed. I have one," she said, pointing to the subtle indentation on her right cheek. "But yours, they're so pronounced. You know what that means, right?" "I don't know," said Stephen bashfully. "It means, when you were very little," Sylvia said, taking a step closer. "When you were just a tiny little baby, you were kissed by an angel." She quickly placed a peck on each cheek. "But it was a dark angel." Sylvia hopped in the car. Luna started to bark. "I'll see you around." "Bye, Luna." Sylvia drove off, leaving Stephen stunned stiff. His heart pounded against the walls of his chest. Luna brushed her fur against his pant leg, looking up at Stephen longingly. "All right," Stephen finally said, regaining some composure. "Let's head home." It was nearly dark when they arrived back at the apartment. Thankfully, Stephen's roommate, Mark, was still at work. Stephen got himself a beer and walked out onto the balcony. The night air was warm and well lit by the luminescence of a dazzling full moon. Stephen closed his eyes, starting to feel tired from such a long, strange, and eventful day. He wanted to unwind with a movie and maybe fall asleep on the couch. Then he remembered he had more to take care of than just himself, and he hadn't given Luna anything to eat except puppy treats since picking her up at the kennel. She was sure to be hungry. He walked into the apartment. "Luna," Stephen crooned. She didn't come, probably still getting the lay of the land, Stephen thought. He walked to the big bag of supplies and fished out a bowl and some puppy chow. He filled it and called again for his companion. "Luna, come here, girl. Don't you want some food?" A female voice behind him answered. "How about a drink instead?" Stephen spun on his heels. Standing in the doorway connecting his bedroom to the den was a beautiful woman in a navy blue bathrobe belonging to Stephen's roommate, Mark. The stranger had raven black hair cascading down her shoulders. She was slender, with long, thin legs, ample breasts, and porcelain skin. "Who are—" Stephen began, but his voice trailed off as he looked closely at her face. The woman's sweet complexion, the way the corner of her mouth curled into a seductive smirk, and the piercing gaze of her icy blue eyes. Stephen said in a shaking voice, "Luna?" Chapter 4. A Bit of Light Reading. Mark stared at the clock from behind the counter of the local print center. It was 10 minutes until the store closed for the evening, and Mark waited, fantasizing about the pasta carbonara he planned to make when he got home. He visualized each step in his mind, rendering guanciale in the pan, adding garlic, butter, and fresh egg yolk to perfectly cooked angel hair. He would stir the spaghetti, adding a little of the starchy pasta water until the consistency turned silky. Each corner of his jaw tingled at the thought of grating nutty parmesan over a carefully plated twirl of creamy pasta. Then he would crack black pepper and add a sprig of fresh basil for brightness of flavor and color. But before Mark could taste a forkful of his imagined masterpiece, a gruff voice called him back to reality.
"Mark, I'm going to need you to lock up tonight,"
said Mr. Krupp, Mark's short, balding, and thickly mustached store manager.
"My cats are going at it again."
"Mr. Krupp, this is the third time in a week," said Mark, not even trying to mask the disappointment of postponing his late-night feast.
"Mark, they're humping each other. What am I supposed to do?"
Mark came up with half a dozen solutions that he wisely kept to himself, knowing they would only spark his officious boss's ire. "Fine," Mark said with a sigh.
"Thank you. I'll flip the sign."
Mr. Krupp put on his coat and a bowler hat, making his way to the front door. He turned the sign so to Mark it read, "Yes, we're open," and the opposite to anyone outside of the store.
"Oh, and Mark,"
said Mr. Krupp. "Yes," he answered.
"One last thing. A job came through the website. Pick up early tomorrow morning. And, well, I was going to do it, but I was already behind on a few things, and then wifey called to let me know about the cats, and—"
"I'll take care of it," said Mark.
"Good man. Have a good night."
Mr. Krupp promptly exited the store. Mark sighed and walked into Mr. Krupp's office, a small supply room located in the back. The room was mostly anonymous, save for a portrait of Mrs. Krupp, wifey, along with their 3 cats. Mark walked behind his boss's desk and turned on the monitor of his computer. His heart sank as Mr. Krupp had not been entirely truthful with the assignment that had just come in through the website. It was technically one assignment, but with 4 jobs, all needing printing, collating, and binding. More frustrating, however, the job came in at 4 o'clock, meaning Mr. Krupp had been sitting on this for nearly 4 hours. Mark felt exasperated, thought about quitting, then sighed and got to work. 40 minutes passed, and Mark was nearly done with the late-given assignment. He put the paper, still warm from the printer, into its binding, and was ready to print the job completion form when he heard the familiar jingle of the bell on the front door of the print shop. Shit, Mark thought. He had lost himself in finishing the job and completely forgot to lock up the store. There was sure to be some frantic half-wit desperately trying to print something at the last minute. Mark cleared his throat and tried pitching his voice as low as possible to sound more authoritarian. I'm sorry, but we're closed. Mark grabbed his attaché case and walked out of the office to the front of the store. Standing in front of one of the copy machines was a man wearing dark boots, black pants, and a hooded sweatshirt underneath a dark leather jacket. Hey guy, said Mark. Didn't you see the sign? The man didn't answer. He pressed a few buttons on the machine, and the machine spit out a photocopy. Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to stop right there, the hooded man shouted, pointing a .357 Magnum to Mark's head. Mark froze. The man holding the gun was covered in blood. He had scratches on his face, and the front of his sweatshirt was torn in various places, with several crimson stains. He was sweating, out of breath, and the look in the man's eyes betrayed no feeling that he had already pulled the trigger, and would not hesitate to pull it again. Whoa, take it easy, man, said Mark, instinctively putting up his hands. Turn the page. What? The page. Turn the fucking page, he said, pointing to the copier. Okay, said Mark, taking his bag off of his shoulder and setting it next to the machine. He lifted the cover of the photocopier and was thoroughly puzzled with what he found resting on the glass. It was a large book. Its cover was dark brown with the texture of a scab and gold trim adorning the edges. There were a series of blood-red jewels embedded in its spine, but most surprising was a bloodshot eyeball protruding from the center of the front cover. A bit of light reading? Mark deadpanned. The hooded man pulled back the lever of his Magnum. Take it easy, Mark pleaded. Page, now! Mark picked up the book and turned the page carefully as the paper was thin and desiccated. The book was a mess of scribbles, and Mark had trouble deciphering what was text and what was annotation, as words were blotted, scribbled out, even burned off the page. He set the book down on the glass and closed the cover. Mark hit a few buttons on the machine and awkwardly stared at the gunman, who still had the gun pointed toward him. But now his eyes were pointing toward the door. He seemed anxious. The machine whirred to life, and Mark watched the slow scanning beam as the mysterious book got copied. There was a high-pitched whining, followed by silence. Mark looked into the paper tray, waiting for the duplicate. Nothing. There were several beeps, followed by an on-screen error message. What's going on? Asked the hood. I don't know. He looked again. Shit, it's out of toner, said Mark. No, it's not. The hooded man was getting more agitated. He pushed the barrel of his gun into Mark's back. Mark stood upright, and to both their surprise, said in a calm voice, The machine is out of toner. It won't print until I replace it. Fuck! The man's eyes darted to the door, then back. Just fix it! Mark didn't move. I have to go back and get a new cartridge, said Mark.
Bullshit.
My guy, I don't know what to tell you, Mark said plainly. You can come with me if you want, and he gestured toward Mr. Krupp's office.
No,
shouted the hood. He was panicking, and his eyes darted from Mark to the front door, back to Mark. Maybe he was being followed, thought Mark. Maybe the police were close behind him. What do you want me to do? Asked Mark. The man waited a beat. He licked blood off of his lips.
Go get the toner. Then fix this thing so I can get the hell out of here, please!
The man sounded genuinely scared, as if it was Mark holding the gun instead of himself. Whatever was after him, it was far worse than the police. Okay, Mark said. He turned to go into the back office, taking slow, measured steps, fearing that if he moved too quickly, the hood might confuse it for him trying to run and put a bullet in his ass. Safely in the back, Mark let out a long breath, thankful to be out of the gunman's range. Mark went into his pocket looking for a cell phone. Shit, Mark said, realizing he left his cell phone in his attaché case resting against the photocopier. He looked for anything else. The phone on the wall hadn't worked in years, thanks Mr. Krupp. And the time it would take for him to send an email would be too long not to provoke suspicion. He was trapped. Mark opened a drawer. Inside were several loose cartridges, which looked similar to cassette tapes. Also in the drawer was a silver letter opener. He picked it up. It was heavy in his palm, about 10 inches long, with a sharp point. Mark envisioned stabbing the man. Each illusion ended with Mark violently shot in the head. He sighed and tucked the letter opener into his back pocket. Mark started toward the front of the store when he heard a scream and 2 gunshots. Mark hit the deck, covering his head with his hands. Another scream emanated from the hooded figure, followed by a low gurgling. Mark laid motionless for what seemed like a condensed version of eternity, waiting for the hood, or whatever was chasing the hood, to walk in, find him cowering in the office, and put an end to his pitiful existence. But no one came into the office. Only when Mark was convinced that no one was in the store did he get up, still crouched, and begin slowly toward the front of the store. The hooded man was gone, but the smell of gunpowder still lingered in the air. Mark saw his bag next to the printer, grabbed it, and made a beeline for the exit. Chapter 5. Thirst for Knowledge. They spoke for hours. Then Stephen stood up from the couch. He paused, then addressed Luna, sitting across from him in the love seat, still wearing Mark's blue terry cloth bathrobe and sipping a mug of hot tea. The color was gone from Stephen's face. So you're a... Yes, said Luna. But instead of a... You're a... And instead of a... You turn into a... Luna began slowly clapping, a smile broadening across her face as every clap picked up volume and speed. Okay, enough of that, Stephen said, turning red with embarrassment. You know, Stephen, it took 4 times explaining and a bit of fainting on your part, but I think you finally got it. I'm really proud of you. Stephen, unamused, continued pacing back and forth. So what? So what now? What is this? What are we supposed to do here exactly? Stephen asked frantically. Luna tilted her head to the side as if caught off guard, but then quickly shrugged it off, smiling. Well, funny you should ask, Luna said, looking down at her mug. I have to tell you, this is a dynamite cup of jasmine I've got here. But it's not exactly what I had in mind when I asked for a drink. Do you remember that? Yes. And then you, fainted? Finished Luna. Yes, Stephen said quickly, a rosy blush burning beneath his cheeks. So, Luna put down the mug on the coffee table and clasped her hands together diplomatically. I was thinking I can find something else to wear, and then we can go out on the town. tie one on. Stephen blinked. He had just been asked on a date by the most beautiful woman he had ever laid eyes on, and he couldn't be more upset about it. That is ridiculous, said Stephen while he continued pacing. Luna visibly recoiled at Stephen's condemnation. Then she relaxed, easing into the love seat and setting her face like flint. Why is it ridiculous? Asked Luna calmly. Stephen ignored the question, opting for another beer. He went to the fridge, but the fridge was gone, completely missing from its space in the kitchen. Where's my? Asked Stephen. Why is it ridiculous? Asked Luna. Her question, rhythmically spoken, danced on the air toward Stephen's eardrums. Stephen spun around facing Luna. The coffee table in front of her and the mug resting on its surface were gone. Stephen felt dizzy and took another step forward toward the sofa, but the sofa had also disappeared. Stephen's heartbeat quickened. He turned on his heels. The microwave was gone. The pictures hanging on the wall, gone. With each blink, more items disappeared from the background of Stephen's life. The coffee maker, the bookcase, the television, everything tangible disappeared as if Stephen's eyes were a vaporizing laser, shifting focus and casting objects into murky oblivion. Why is it ridiculous? Asked Luna. Luna, where is all my stuff? Stephen pointed his left index finger toward the growing emptiness of his apartment. Then he saw he had no finger. He looked to his right hand, no right thumb. It didn't hurt, which was, to Stephen, more troubling and sank him further into panic. He looked back and forth to each hand as his appendages became formless. What's happening to me? Cried Stephen. Why is it ridiculous? Asked Luna in a voice of mesmerizing coolness. The walls vanished, replaced with a void expanse. Stephen turned to the window and quaked as the city lights folded in on themselves, disappearing into darkness along with street signs and traffic lights and everything lit by the brightness of the moon, disappeared until Stephen only saw his reflection in the glass. Stephen's flannel shirt and denim pants were gone, and his naked body slowly erased. His skin came away in layers, and he was a composition of muscle, organ, and sinew. Then only bone connected to a nervous system. Finally, his reflection was gone, and Stephen, now just a pair of eyes connected to a brainstem, floated in the void across from Luna, fully intact and sitting calmly. Then one of two things happened. Either Luna became nearly planet-sized, or Stephen shrunk to fill the space of a hydrogen atom. What remained of Stephen Shepard careened towards the vacuous pupils of Luna's eyes, crowned with irises of azure stardust. He floated 2 abysses removed from the reality of his crappy apartment, the monotony of his work at the call center, and his half-assed life. Wrapped in this oblivion, Stephen realized the universe would not be so different without him. Luna spoke in a voice that became Stephen's whole world. I know you, Stephen Shepard. I've met you hundreds, if not thousands of times before. And I know you think you don't know me, but the first thing you should know is I can be very persuasive. Stephen was flung across the void, and with a convulsion, as if plunged into icy water, returned to his body, kneeling in the middle of the living room. He panted, and looking around wildly, discovered the apartment had returned to its original state. Everything was back where it should be, as were all his fingers. Stephen opened his mouth to speak, but was quickly interrupted by Luna. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. It's just... She crouched in front of Stephen. "Will you help me?" He looked into her icy blue eyes and felt his spirit connected to a dazzling light, pulled into the gravity of a dying star, even if this meant being shattered against the rocky shores of Luna's watering corneas. She held his face in her hands, their first touch. Her palms were soft and warm. Stephen could have given her the moon. There was a sound at the front door as someone put a key into the doorknob. "Shit," said Stephen. "Who's that?" asked Luna. "My roommate. Quick, get in my room." Stephen hurried Luna across the room and, pressing a finger to his pursed lips, shut the door. Stephen turned around, and Mark was already in the apartment, frantically fumbling with the door's deadbolt. With considerable effort, he locked the door and hastily collapsed onto the floor. Stephen looked at his roommate perplexedly. "Long day?" asked Stephen. "I think they followed me home." "Who's they?" "I don't even know. All I know is there was this guy making photocopies of this book, and he had a gun, and I'm not sure if we're safe here." Mark went to the window and peeked out the blinds toward the street. "Did you say gun?" "I said gun," said Mark. "I'm calling the police," said Stephen. Stephen pulled his cell phone from his pocket and dialed 9. Then he dialed 1. And then Stephen's tongue swelled to almost twice its size. "Sorry, Mark, I think I need a..." Stephen looked up from his phone and saw Mark had already flipped the tap with his head underneath the faucet. He was gulping water like a man trying to drown himself. Stephen stormed over to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and drained it in 3 gulps. But he still felt parched. He grabbed another bottle, but Stephen's tongue continued to swell with every swallow. Mark lifted his head from the sink. "What the hell?" he said between gasps. Stephen's desiccated lips cracked and flaked like molted snakeskin. Casting his half-finished beer to the floor, Stephen threw himself toward the kitchen sink and drank from its gushing spigot. The water felt like a cloud on his tongue. His eyes rolled to the back of his head as the drought enveloping his body finally felt quenched, but his mouth stayed there, attached to the tap, as if a pair of strong and invisible hands forced his jaws together. "Stephen," cried Mark. Stephen wanted to help his friend, but he physically couldn't take his lips from the faucet. He was glued, drinking more water, breathing through his nose. Mark cursed as he lumbered from the kitchen towards the bathroom, dividing each of their bedrooms. Mark grabbed the handle of the bathroom door and threw it open to find a beautiful woman with raven hair standing in front of the sink, tightening the strap of a black high-heel shoe onto her right foot. "Oh, I'm sorry," said Mark, both shocked and embarrassed. "It's okay. I was just finishing up. What'll it be?" asked the gorgeous woman. "Excuse me?" asked Mark. "I'm afraid we're out of top shelf," Luna said, pulling a Dixie cup from the cabinet. "But people are raving about tonight's special. Here, try it." She filled the cup, handing it to Mark. "This one's on the house," she said with a wink. Back in the kitchen, Stephen felt his mouth close tightly so that his cheeks puffed, and water came jetting from the creases of his lips. Breathing through his nose soon became impossible, and Stephen cried with violent "Whoosh!" muted by the metallic flow as his cranium ballooned. Stephen banged his hands against the granite top. He stomped his feet, signaling distress, but no one came to his aid while his mouth stayed permanently to the tap of the gushing sink. Stephen reached for the knobs to cut the flow. He spun each knob in vain while torrents continued pummeling his gullet. Stephen's head swam and the room went murky as twinkling lights played on the edges of his vision. Buried in the annals of his mind, emerged with startling clarity the time he and 2 other boys in Stephen's 7th grade class tried peeking through the buttons of their buxom English teacher's blouse. Miss Rafferty was a new teacher at Hanover Elementary who lit the halls with her glowing smile, shiny auburn hair, and sparkling doe eyes. She was young and sweet and quickly a favorite teacher among the students as she regularly gave out candy and words of encouragement in what was otherwise a rigid, no-nonsense curriculum. Miss Rafferty had another characteristic that made her stand out in a crowd, and that was her buxom chest that she delighted darning from time to time. She played jump rope with the school's dress code, showing just enough skin to be enticing, but little enough to skirt any of the consequences. Some of the teachers wagged withering fingers at Miss Rafferty's vivacious expression, but she blew them kisses and won their hearts, as she did with most of her male students. On the first day of spring, Hanover Elementary held its field day at the local park, hosting a day of recreation for students and faculty alike. Outside the walls of their school, Miss Rafferty felt exceptionally free, wearing nothing but a short denim skirt and a white blouse with bright sunflowers over her sun-kissed skin. Of course, with Miss Rafferty in charge of the water tent, people saw her commitment to keeping everybody hydrated, as well as her attire. "I don't want anyone getting the vapors," she would say as she bounced from student to student, filling small paper cups with water. On one such refill, Miss Rafferty swooped in on Stephen, Mark, and their friend, Tom Flannery, with pitcher in hand. Mark and Stephen thanked Miss Rafferty for her kindness, and she took off to refill the pitcher. Tom began to snicker. "What are you laughing at?" asked Stephen. Nothing," Tom said quickly. "Spill it," said Mark. Tom leaned in close and whispered, "Rafferty's not wearing a bra." "You're full of it," said Mark. "Scout's honor," Tom said, crossing his heart with a finger. "I seen her titty." "No, you didn't," said Stephen. "Well, I seen the edge," Tom said, rubbing his fingers in a circle over his left nipple. Mark and Stephen looked at Tom, and then to each other. Mark shrugged as if to say, "Better than nothing," and the boys took their Dixie cups like shots of alcohol in hopes Miss Rafferty might circle back. Not a minute passed before she arrived, topping each of their cups off, saying, "You boys drink faster than I can fill them." "It's a hot one," Mark said, staring chestward and grinning. Mark stood left of Miss Rafferty, with a clear line of sight to the purported edge. Tommy stood opposite Mark, his eyes quickly probing Miss Rafferty's right breast. Stephen could practically hear the snapping camera lens in Tommy's head as he cataloged imaginary photographs, saving them for a few intimate moments alone. Stephen, in front of Miss Rafferty, was struck by her loveliness. She had a remarkable figure, but even more captivating were her big brown eyes, like thick swirls of chocolate icing on 2 freshly frosted cakes. Stephen knew from the tightness of her blouse, however, Tommy was right. Miss Rafferty was letting gravity do the work. "You boys be careful now," said Miss Rafferty. "You can drop dead drinking water just like if you don't." "Really?" asked Stephen. "Sure. If you drink too much, it can create an imbalance of electrolytes, and then you go into shock and die." "That sounds awful," Mark deadpanned, still staring at Miss Rafferty's titty. There was a long pause, which Miss Rafferty finally broke by saying, "It's really a death by embarrassment," she said, turning her head to Tommy and then Mark. Both of them looked up like deer in headlights. They were busted. Miss Rafferty stood with her back straight and chin tilted skyward. "Sure," said Miss Rafferty, a coy smile forming on her lips. "All that water? I bet you'd piss yourself." Mark and Tom both started drinking from empty cups to hide their reddening faces. Miss Rafferty smiled and rolled her eyes. "Have fun today, boys," she said, tossing a cheeky wink toward Stephen. In his apartment, bent over at the waist, drowning in his kitchen sink. Stephen wondered if that wink from his 7th grade teacher would be the last thing to go through his mind before a great darkness swallowed him completely. Chapter 6. Three's a Crowd. Stephen's fingers went numb while he continued fumbling with the knobs of the sink, and the tremendous onslaught persisted. A deep purple fog crept in from the edges of Stephen's sight as the column of water pummeled his esophagus, water gushing from his nostrils. It would soon start pouring from his ears, Stephen thought. There was the familiar sound of a key entering the lock of the front door. The knob twisted, and into the apartment walked Jade Flannery, Mark's girlfriend of 4 years. "Oh my goodness! Stephen!" exclaimed Jade, rushing to the sink and laying hands on her struggling friend. Suddenly, Stephen became unstuck from the faucet. He collapsed to the floor. Jade knelt down next to him with a concerned look over her face. Stephen coughed violently. At that moment, Mark and Luna entered the room. "We got a man down," said Mark. "What happened?" asked Luna. "I think he fell overboard," added Mark. Stephen looked up at the two of them, wordlessly out of breath. Mark filled the silence. "Steve, I didn't know we had company. You should have said something. I hear the two of you are going out tonight." Jade stood up, surprised by the sight of her boyfriend and the beautiful woman emerging from the bathroom together. "Hi," Jade said awkwardly. Luna didn't say anything. Stephen continued coughing, while Mark stood there like a dumb post. "Oh," Mark realized. "Jade, this is Luna. Luna, this is my girlfriend Jade." A perplexed look flashed across Luna's face. Then she looked at Jade, feigning a smile. "Charmed," said Luna, who, not waiting for a reply, walked to the refrigerator and, bending over at the waist, opened it. The black fabric of her dress stretched taut against her porcelain figure. Jade, the first to stop staring, slapped Mark hard on the stomach and pursed her lips fiercely at him. Mark closed his jaw with a sharp click and raised his hands to defend against a second blow. "So, Jade started, not breaking eye contact with Mark. "Where are you guys planning to go?" Luna popped off the cap of a beer and took a long sip, emptying the bottle. Jade gawked at her, waiting for a cough, a belch, eyes glistening, a trickling nose, something in the way of distress, but it never came. Luna confidently set the bottle down and looked questioningly toward Stephen. "I suppose wherever she can get another one of those," said Stephen. "Why don't you come with us?" suggested Luna. No, I couldn't impose like that. You two have a good time," replied Mark. I don't think Stephen is going to make it," Jade said, as Stephen broke into another fit of coughing. I'm fine," Stephen blurted out in between convulsions of his aspirating lungs. "Come on, 2 is fun, but 3's a crowd," Luna said, pleading with her eyes. "Did she say 3? Jade asked quietly. "Well, okay," Mark caved without a glance toward Stephen, or Jade, staring daggers into the side of his head. "Great. I'll get my coat," said Luna, darting into Stephen's room. Where did she get a coat from? Stephen asked himself. With the door closed, an irate Jade turned toward Mark, smoldering. 2's fun, but 3's a crowd? What does that even mean? Honey, I'm sure she just misspoke, said Mark. Well, have fun being a crowd, Jade said with air quotes. Did you get the ingredients? I did not get the ingredients, Mark said sheepishly. Well, I could just take a picture of you right now. Stephen, who had heard this back and forth countless times before, rolled his eyes, knowing exactly what came next. Oh, really? And do what? Mark asked playfully. Priority mail it, USPS, to Merriam-freaking-Webster, and they would stick it next to their definition of stupid jerk boyfriend. Jade fumed as she stomped toward the bedroom. There's a coupon for Postmates on my phone, said Mark, but the slamming door had already punctuated their conversation. She sounds pissed, said Stephen. She'll get over it, Mark said, pulling Stephen to his feet and nearly tearing his arm loose from its socket. Where the hell did you meet this girl? Asked Mark. Listen, Stephen started. I hope it's okay for me to come, by the way. I am strictly your wingman on this. I mean, obviously, Mark said, gesturing toward Jade in the bedroom. No, Mark, you don't understand. What's there to understand? You're on a date. I'm proud of you. No, listen to me, said Stephen. She's a dog. The enthusiastic smile fell from Mark's face. She's a dog. Stephen said it again in hopes of convincing himself even more than his confused roommate. A thick and awkward silence hung in the air. Mark, you have to believe me. Mark blinked. Oh, I believe you, he said. Thank the Lord, said Stephen with a sigh of relief. I believe you are out of your damn mind. Mark looked mad enough to spit, then continued. Stephen, do you need your eyes checked? That girl, what's her name, Luna? That girl is a smoke show. And you're on a date with her. And now you're getting down like she's a dog? Like she's not that good looking? Listen, buddy, not everybody can play with the pros, but holy goat, you're on your way with a girl like that. That girl is apocalyptically hot. Stephen stood there dumbfounded. Luna walked out of the bedroom, wearing a black coat with fur trim. Stephen recognized the coat as belonging to his ex-girlfriend, Nicole. He had been meaning to give it back to her. Are we ready? Luna asked with a bounce in her step. I promise. I don't bite.